Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Mechanics of the Fourth Wall. Joining myself and Antonio Subirats tonight is Bob Xanadu60 from Globebusters. How you doing, Bob?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good, Nathan. Thanks for having me on the show.
It's an absolute pleasure as always. Also joining myself and Antonio tonight is Patricia Steer of Flat Earth and Other Hot Potatoes. How you doing, Patricia?
Hello, Nathan. Thank you for having me on. And Antonio, thank you for having me on. And Bob, thank you for being there. Thank you for being you.
Thank you.
Well, maybe Bob can kick us off by talking about some fairly big news that came out from the camp of Crow 777. So, Bob, without stealing any of your thunder at all, tell us all about that little video that Crow did recently. I think it was 2 days ago.
Okay, well, it's not really my thunder, but it's something that an idea that I've been playing around with. It's just that when Crow phrased it the way that he did, it really struck a chord with me, and it's kind of like something that's been there, obvious, the whole time, and then somebody will phrase it in just a certain way where it's like, oh my God, wait a minute, now I really see into this very deeply. But what we're talking about is Crow 777 came out with an announcement this week. Where basically he has posited the idea, or the belief, I should say, that space is actually made up of a liquid medium like water. And he gave his reasons for it. He gave analogies to the lunar wave and how the lunar wave essentially looks something very much akin to water kind of washing over the moon. There's a lot of examples like that we're going to talk about. And also, I noticed that, and this is something we'll talk about a little bit later on also, that Brian Mullen in his Fire and Ice theory also came out and was saying that the mesosphere looked to him, or the thermosphere, one of the two, I can't remember which one it was, but he said it looked very much to him like that was water, and he actually labeled it as such. So that really kind of fired my imagination in a multitude of ways, and so I think it's going to be a really exciting topic to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it's something, before the show we started, we were trying to dice up the actual phrasing in scripture, but this is possibly something that's been in the back of a lot of people's mind for quite some time, and it just sort of takes someone like Crow to really voice it, like you say, in a particular phrasing, to really prick your ears up and put it to the forefront of your mind.
Yes,
Yeah.
and there'll be a lot of Christians saying, aha, our Bible says that. And then there'll be a lot of Jews, not quite as many as Christians, saying, hey, 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 it's the Torah part of the Bible, it's the Old Testament that talks about that. They'll be trying to claim, you stole our idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I think is really neat about it is it kind of brings a lot of things into perspective. I mean, not only biblically what is being said about the firmaments dividing the waters from above from the waters below, but it could even, and I don't know how far I want to go down this road, but it could even give a little bit of credibility to something that NASA might be doing. And of course, I'm referring directly back to their little incident where they had their space helmets fill up with water. And I just thought, well, I know NASA's full of BS, but I have to wonder if this quote-unquote secret space project that, like Richard Hoagland had mentioned before, was something that possibly they had found a way to get through, possibly like that lower membrane of the firmament, whether it's magnetic or if it's actually some sort of membrane type material. That was described on, I can't remember the guy's name that had the show where he was talking about he was on the bottom of the ocean and he saw a lake on the bottom of the ocean and they tried to descend through it, but they kind of bounced off of it because there was some sort of a membrane there. And I started thinking, gee, I wonder if something like that could actually be like the lower firmament, and that would be roughly at about 100 kilometers, 66 miles. And you think about stuff like that, it's like, who knows? Who knows? It's a very interesting idea, and it certainly would give a lot of credibility to a lot of strange, anomalous things that we see in the star, not the least of which would be the sonoluminescence effect of stars, where basically you are bombarding a body of water with different cymatic sound frequencies, which then brings forth kind of a starlight appearance. So yeah, very, very fascinating ideas. And like I said, Brian Mullen came pretty much to the same conclusion.
The
I
first
mean,
thing I thought when
you
I heard
mentioned
about
briefly.
it. Oh,
Sorry,
sorry.
Patricia. I was just going to say, you mentioned briefly about the water that was on the lower level, and from memory, it was quite some time ago that I watched it. It had sort of like sea creatures, almost like cockles, growing on the shoreline of this lake.
Yeah, mussels, he said specifically.
That was it, mussels. But yeah, it looked like what you would picture rolling up to a shoreline, but as you say, they got closer and closer to it and then tried to descend into it, and it definitely looked like a pool of water, but it was almost like trying to bounce off steel, wasn't it? They just hit it and bounced straight back up again.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the membrane, that kind of thing there. Could be what's in space could be the same as what's in the water. You know what I'm saying? The same
Right.
exact sort of field.
Absolutely.
The first thing when I heard about this was it filled me with the same feeling, well, close to the same feeling as when I found out about flat Earth and when it started ringing true to me, the whole water thing. It just got me so excited, and I started thinking about various things like Crow's lunar wave, the word wave.
Mhm.
Water was there all along. It's, they always say hidden in plain sight, but I know Crow wasn't trying to hide anything from us. But right there, and then the snorkels in space. And I started thinking about, okay, we all know NASA is lying. What could they have done? And just what you said, Bob, popped into my mind. Maybe they found a way to get up there. They're not telling us what they're really doing. They're still keeping that illusion of the vacuum of space and all of that. But then again, look at all the things they fake. If they could do something up there, why wouldn't they tell us that space was water? Because how does that do something like negate a creator? They just get up there and say, well, it's water. And then the other thing I was thinking is that if it were water, we've all been in pools, lakes, etc. And when you swim and when you move in water, there's a lot of resistance. And so when they were doing spacewalks, the astronauts would have to know where they were because they'd be pushing against a greater resistance than they would in the supposed vacuum of space. Lots to think about.
Right. Well, I think a lot of the reason still that they would lie about it is because even if they did come out and say that it was water, they are still lying about the shape of the Earth. So, if they're floating around up there, or they have certain densities maybe that they can't penetrate, past a certain viscosity of the water, that could be part of their problem that they're having. At this point, it's completely uncharted territory. We have no idea because, one of the things that I think about is that this water, this membrane, would not behave exactly like typical water. One of the things that Brian Mullen referred to, and I've also pointed this out, is the amateur rocket that was sent up, and it hit something like 60 or 70 miles, and it just stopped spinning, and that we can understand, that we can explain, because there's actually called a despinning mechanism, a yo-yo mechanism that stops it from spinning, but nevertheless, it seems to have just dampened and ran into something that it just kind of cushioned it. It didn't run into anything hard like a crystalline firmament, but it was more like it ran into some sort of membrane that just slowed it down. And then when the propulsion stage of that rocket blew off and fell away, it looked like it was falling away very, very slowly, almost like it was kind of traversing down through a highly dense piece of water or something like that. It was actually floating downwards. So you look at things like that. And the other thing also that I thought was very interesting is that when it did, the audio, exactly, the audio sounded very much like it was underwater. And, I've played a lot of the NASA quote-unquote spacewalks, and they sound very much, again, like they're also underwater, the GoPro. And in order to get sounds like that, you have to have some sort of medium, because sound cannot propagate through a vacuum because it has no medium to propagate through. Sound can propagate through water because it is a highly viscous medium that will take the vibration, and the vibrations will actually traverse through it. So, all of these things are just kind of falling in place. And I think, the way that when Crow came out and just flat out said, I think it's water, and, as well as Brian Mullen, the reason that it hadn't really rang that type of bell for me before is because I was kind of going with the idea that, the firmaments below and the firmaments above, that there was some sort of a chamber that would have been vacuum type that the sun and the moon actually resided in. You know, because you just don't think about, you know, this big ball of fire existing necessarily in an ocean, in water. That just kind of is counterintuitive to even think of it that way. But then, you know, if sonoluminescence works, you know, on the small scale, then why not on the large scale? Many things about that idea, that, you know, assertion that that particular level of space is liquid, really resonates for me, and it's something that I think we really need to pursue.
I mean,
There's
you've
also,
touched on, sorry, Bob, to interrupt, you've touched on solar luminescence and said it a couple of times, that there may be people who have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. Maybe you could explain the star in the jar, or, you know, give it a bit more of an explanation for people who may not know what that actually is.
Okay, well, the star in the jar theory, they actually demonstrate it. Now, there are some people like Aaron Dover who are in great disbelief of it, and he has some fairly good points about it, but from what we've seen and what we've heard, the star in the jar, the sonoluminescence effect, is created by directing specific sound waves, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the sound spectrum, 30 to 30,000 hertz. You know, when the Bible's talking about God speaking, you automatically assume that it's sound in the 30 to 30,000 hertz range, like we could actually hear it. But I think that's more of a metaphor for simply the vibration. So and we'll call sound all vibration from DC to, you know, gamma ray or whatever. So what the sonoluminescent effect is when you have a kind of a convergence of sound frequencies, or, you know, just waves that are converging at a certain phase at a certain point in the water. And because of the sound pressure waves where they converge at in the water, it causes the water to do something really bizarre, and that is to literally fluoresce and light up kind of like a sun. And that's called a sonoluminescence effect in its most basic form.
Yes, and what it does as well, where these sound waves meet up at this point, it actually creates a bubble. So the bubble changes the medium from the fluid, which is the water, to lack of water. So it's in this bubble that the light occurs. So it's really strange. Has anybody seen, not to go off topic, but in fact it's not off topic, the footage of an alien critter flying past the ISS?
No.
No, I haven't seen
swimming past, actually. I don't know if I can display screen. Should I display screen, Nathan?
Yeah, if you want to find it on your desktop and click screen share, right hand side.
Okay, so
When I see those kind of videos, I pass by them because I think, oh, that's just some kind of fake thing.
But now
it sounds interesting, now that we've got this going on.
So
yeah, they have a few different things like that, and it makes you wonder if it isn't just, you know, the camera, some very small water creature, you know, somebody let some sort of a little water creature loose in the NASA swimming pool, and it kind of swam by very close to the camera, and that's what you're seeing, because a lot of stuff is like that. There was a video out previously where it showed this gigantic, it looked like a top of a parachute type thing, and they're saying that they called it a mothership that was above the Earth, and it was so funny because there was one of the ESA projects was actually, you know, deploying one of these things, and so what they did is they kind of, you know, mashed those two things together, and it was, you know, had nothing to do with a mothership being over the Earth. That's just crazy, but so I take them with a grain of salt too, Patricia.
Yes, it's just curious.
Sorry, it was just one other thing. I remember when they had a tether snap loose from Hubble.
Yes.
Do you remember this?
Yes.
And it essentially looked like it had hit the bottom of a pool, and then lots of bubbles had come up, and the alien conspiracy people got hold of this and, you know, concluded that it was an alien invasion, but it was so clearly just bubbles at the bottom of a tank.
Yeah, Richard C. Hoagland was largely responsible for that because he put it forward in a lot of his videos too. And of course, being a big Richard C. fan, I bought it hook, line, and sinker at the time. Oh well.
Am I sharing screen?
Yeah, do you want it? You're ready to go? I'll present you to everyone. And
okay.
Okay.
So it comes up from about a third of the way across the screen at the bottom, you'll see. Well, there you go, big arrow pointing to it.
Okay, let's see. Let me actually click on it because I'm not seeing the share. There we go. I think, Nathan, you have to click on Antonio's icon to actually present it out to everybody.
I'm actually seeing it.
There you go. Now I see it.
Now they're going to show it again through filters.
Oh. It's like
Yeah,
a jellyfish.
Exactly. That looks like some sort of a little water critter.
Yeah.
Or a jellyfish, I'm thinking, but it could be something much smaller because it could be a small model. But if they're really able to be in space, I mean in space as water, but they're not telling us about that, would there be bubbles or would that be a function of the pool? Because if they're in a sealed environment, look at that. If they're in a sealed environment, there wouldn't be air in there. So where would the bubbles go if they're in space? Where would they be going to? A pocket of air at the top?
Yeah, and remember, a lot of times they film things upside down so that the bubbles will go downwards. So, just to keep the viewer constantly confused about orientation, they do the same thing with their alleged spacewalks. So you always have to kind of keep that in mind because, through our normal everyday eyes, we tend to want to see things right side up, tend to believe that everything else is right side up, and we don't ever consider the possibility that maybe that they've just flipped the camera, which would give air bubbles the effect of going down, not up, and then we would discount the possibility of them being air bubbles because we all know that air bubbles rise in water. So yeah, NASA's very tricky. You've got to watch all their little tricks that they do.
Yeah. Before we go too deeply into sort of NASA fakery, one thing that Antonio, while we're still on the subject of water, that you talked about was, I think you called it an incantation, but where you put thanks into water, in other words, along the lines of water having a memory.
Masaru Emoto. Yeah.
Do you want to give us a bit of an explanation of that? It's a nice little segue between the collective unconscious and the waters above, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, Masaru Emoto, a Japanese PhD doctor, realized that you could imprint water with thought. He tried speaking, and that worked, and then he tried writing on the side of a jar, and that worked, and then he also tried just thinking the thought. And what he was doing is he was thinking a thought into water, then taking a drop, freezing it and looking at the crystals, and each time thanks was said, every time it was thank you, the crystals would look like a snowflake of a certain type. When what was expressed was love, those crystals would look like a different kind of snowflake. So each incantation, as it were, would have its own result. Now, we've been talking about the collective unconscious and thinking, okay, the mechanisms through which the collective unconscious functions are definitely not understood. But if water has memory and water can transfer information, because what Masaru Emoto found, and this has been replicated throughout universities. In fact, the same thing happens if you drop a lily into water, and you then take a drop from that water and put it into a vial of water that has not had a lily, and you then look into these drops, you can see a reflection of a lily inside the drops. It's really crazy. So Nathan and I were pondering whether the firmament, the water out there, could act as a medium for the collective unconscious, where people receive information from that and posit information into it. So it could explain why several people can arrive at the same conclusion or the same idea pop into different people's consciousness. It seems to me to make sense that if we're resonating at a vibration that's that is keyed to the same consciousness as that idea would be picked up just like it would by a radio station that's receiving that signal.
Right. And another thing, Antonio, well, first of all, let me go back a little bit and say that the first time I ever came across Dr. Masaru Emoto's work was in a movie, gosh, it was about 15 years ago, something like that, called What the Bleep Do We Know?
Yes.
Yes, I thought too.
And a fabulous movie, really, really good information. If anybody hasn't seen it, they should check it out. But the scene in the movie basically is taking place at a train station, and they've got this little exhibit set up, and they have this little kind of tour guide sitting there talking about the different pictures that they have of water, and the meditations and the expressions, the intentions that were kind of pointed at these vials of water, and then they would quick freeze it, and it would make, you know, whenever somebody would kind of project a thought of love and peace and harmony and brotherhood, and then they would quick freeze this water, it would come out with the most beautiful, crystalline, gorgeous, you know, structure. And conversely, when they would project a notion of hatred, you know, I hate you or something like this, it would come out and be very, very ugly. So water definitely has memory to it. In fact, there's all kinds of studies about water and water memory that are out there. And that's why, you know, one of the best things that you can do also when you're consuming water is to distill it. And I know that that's kind of going off in a little bit of a tangent. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Essentially, yeah, distilling water will kind of remove a lot of the I don't know, I don't want to call it bad memories, but it will kind of restructure it so that it's more pure and more susceptible to better intention. Now, and on that, I just want to tell one story really quick that this is absolutely amazing to me. We have a water machine that is a distiller. It's called a John Ellis water machine that uses, it's not only a distiller, but in the boiling chamber itself, it has a high-intensity full-spectrum light, which, of course, would kill any, you know, microorganisms or anything like that. But what we did, Cami and I did, is we had this soundtrack called Holy Harmony, and it was basically chanting at like the 528 hertz, and it had all of these very resonant, very blessed type of frequencies in it. And so after I made some John Ellis water, I took, and we have these 5-gallon big bottles, glass bottles that we store the water in, and so I took a pair of headphones and I just put it right over the top of the bottle, and I played Holy Harmony chants on it over and over and over again for about 3 or 4 days. And what was amazing about that is that after we did that, we poured the water, and the water was so sweet and delicious. It took on a whole new flavor. It was the most amazing thing, and we thought it was a fluke initially, so we did it again and then again, and it absolutely just kept that wonderful sweet taste to it just from the chants. So, I mean, water is definitely, it takes on memory, it takes on perfect geometric form, and of course, whenever you have intentions of love or anything like that, those vibrations that come off of you actually are commensurate with the phi ratio, or the 1 to 1.618 to 1, the perfect what's the
Fibonacci sequence?
Yeah, it's the well, the Fibonacci sequence ultimately gets to the phi ratio, but you get this perfect type of phase conjugate relationship that brings back everything, the energy, in a perfect phase relationship, and it just makes everything better. It raises your frequency inherently goes up. The taste of water becomes better. It's just amazing. So all of these things that we're talking about seem to just span many, many things. I mean, it's not just isolated to any one particular thing. It seems to cross over into a whole bunch of different things.
I want to add something to that as well, if it's okay, Antonio.
Sure.
There's a company, and it's these sorts of companies are everywhere, but in the United States it's called Boiron, B-O-I-R-O-N. Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong, but they're a homeopathic company where they make these sorts of pellets that you take, a couple of 3 or so, depending upon your condition, put them under your tongue for anything you can imagine. A broken bone, a cold, eczema, you know, you name what it is, heart condition, anything. And these are formed by using what you were talking about, Antonio, with the example of the lily in the water. But it wouldn't be a lily, it would be whatever substance is something that supposedly, according to homeopathy, would cure your condition. And so they keep taking this water and not distill it, but using the word distill, not like how we're using it when it comes to water, break it down further and further and further, so it's less of the lily would be in it, but the power that's in it is still there. A lot of people don't believe in homeopathy, but it's all part of this water having memory thing. It remembers the substance that it was put in it, no matter how many times over you continue to add more water to it. And that's one thing. But with the distilled water machine that I have, a different one than you've got, Bob, I put it in blue glass bottles. And I got the blue glass bottle idea from David Weiss, who has the same water distiller machine that I've got. And we take these blue glass bottles and we put them outside in the sunshine and kind of infuse them with sun. Now, I want to also infuse them with music like you're doing, Bob, but then I have those bottles and drink them. And I take a Post-it note and write on it love or happiness and stick that on the bottle. And even further of a weirdo as I am, when I eat and drink any food, I think in my head, this is providing me with nutrition,
Yes.
health, and happiness. Then I was thinking that that could be like the way we have this tradition of saying prayers before we eat. Maybe it's all about that, the intention put into what we're consuming. So again, everything is connected, and this whole flat Earth revelation has really, really brought that home, including this
What
new
does the
thing
blue
from
bottle
Crow.
do? I mean, I'm just thinking we get nice clean rain and we have a blue sky, and then you mentioned something about a blue bottle and purification of water. So what's the connection?
Blue, according to David, is a frequency that would be the best for doing this sort of thing. And I'm
It
going to
is.
trust David Weiss on this. So, yeah, I looked it up too. So I'll go grab one of my bottles and show it. Why not?
Yeah, and the
Yes.
reason for that, the reason that the blue is, and ultimately I think violet would even be better, but it's because blue and violet are at the higher end of the frequency spectrum for visible light, okay? Whereas red would be at the very lowest part of the spectrum, and green being the center. So what you're doing is you're basically trying to just channel those higher blue frequencies into the water. And that's probably a good thing to do. Personally, you know, if when we do that, we set it in an area of our house that has a whole lot of just bright sunshine, because I tend to think that full spectrum light may be even the better way to go. I don't know, maybe one way or the other, but I certainly understand the idea behind the blue light.
Yeah.
And
Here's the
yeah,
bottle that I have right here. I'm not sure if it's showing, but
Yes, it's
it's got
showing.
a ceramic top, and this one obviously is not used. You know, I have several that I purchased and kind of rotate them in and out. So, you know, I don't know if I'm doing something while I'm doing this, but my inner voice tells me that I am doing something good for myself.
Well, this is the amazing thing about what Masaru Emoto said. Like when what you're intending the water to receive is the idea, the real sense of thankfulness, of gratitude, the water takes that. Now, if you're putting water in this blue bottle and you're thinking happy, healthy, then the water is going to take that.
Well, the
Whether-
prayer before a
whether
meal is
the
called
actual
giving
blue-
thanks, is it not?
Yes.
Yes.
That's what I was saying earlier. That's probably why people in many cultures pray over their food, giving thanks.
And this could also be the holy water. They don't send liters and liters of water to different churches around the world. They bless it in Rome, and they then take small vials that they then put drops of into other waters. So this
Look
could
at
be the
baptism
holy
as
water.
well.
Yeah, yeah.
right.
Mm.
And another area also that this is actually taking place of, I don't know how many people have seen the psychic healing that they do over in China. But essentially what it is they have surgeons that are not using any scalpels or anything like this. They are simply standing over the patient with their hands over the affected area, and they are projecting intention into like a cyst or a tumor of some kind. And it's amazing because they do these demonstrations in real time. They will take and they'll do a sonogram of the tumor beforehand, and they'll have it frozen on one side, and then they'll split the screen, and then on the other side they will have the live feed. And what they are basically projecting into the patient, you know, through their hands, is this intention and this energy that it's already healed, it's already gone away, it's already been corrected, along with a lot of love. And these technicians are very, very skilled at this. And it's amazing. You sit there and you watch this, and they will do this over a period of, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. Greg Braden has a great clip on this. But anyway, they will do this over 15, 20 minutes, and you'll literally sit there and watch the tumor dissolve, get smaller and smaller and smaller by nothing more than intention. And you're right. The same thing goes with when you say your grace before any meal. You're basically projecting that good energy, positive energy, thankful energy, the attitude of gratitude energy into the food that you're eating, and it literally energizes it. And this is far past science fiction, and it's far past speculation. We can actually see these energy transfers, like I mentioned on a previous show, that takes place through Kirlian photography. You can actually see the life force become enhanced when you are projecting this type of energy purely through intention, and that's why meditation is very, very important to be able to kind of fine-tune that capability.
Mm-hmm. So I think what was the music you were playing for your water?
It's called Holy Harmony. You can get it, and all it is a chant, and it goes over and over and over and over and over.
But I know you can't hear me say that.
Yeah, so yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay. No, I heard you say something, Patricia. I missed though.
Patricia?
Uh-oh.
Patricia?
Crickets. She may be having a little technical difficulties. Ruh-roh. She's been having some problems with her Mac lately, so I don't know what's going on. But
Can you hear us?
Does that work? Everything good?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Patricia. That's better.
Was it me? You know what? I thought Bob's mic was muted.
Yeah, so, well, we can all individually mute our mics. So I'm thinking I'm going to get these harmonies, the music that you were playing, but I'll probably drive my neighbours crazy because I don't have headphones that I can put around water, so I'll just have it playing out. They're going to think I'm starting a cult.
Yeah, well, the only reason that I thought to use the headphones is because it's more of a direct input method, I guess, because otherwise you're going to have all kinds of acoustic variations that are going to take place as the audio waves are traversing through the air medium. Yeah. Whereas if you put the vibration right up against the bottle itself, the bottle makes a pretty clean translation, and you get those pure holy harmony tones in the chants directly to the water. So I haven't tried it without the headphones, only with the headphones, but I can tell you that with the headphones, it is one of the most profound things. It's unbelievable. It just makes that water the sweetest thing you've ever drank in your life. It's incredible.
Look at plants, how plants grow when they're exposed to even a soothing, loving human voice, more so than when they're involved in a very loud, sort of aggressive atmosphere.
And there were also amazing studies. There were also studies into embryos, where the women put on their stomach headphones playing classical music, and the children become really advanced really quickly, like reading at the age of 2 and 3. And these studies have been done over and over, and it happens. Sound has this ability to create. So in the case of the fetus, it's either creating actual brain matter or modulating the fetus's ability to receive information from the ether, from the collective unconscious, or whichever. But it's something that's true. And also, we all know that when we've wanted something really, like a glass of water, a coffee, a tea, a drink, when we've really wanted a drink and somebody has brought us that drink, the thank you that we give to that person, because we're so grateful, it's a real, genuine thank you. And we then drink this drink, and it's the most sublime thing we've ever had. So the thank you that we've voiced, our cells have received that thank you. That gratitude is in our water as well as the water of the person who gave us the drink and the drink itself. So saying thank you is just thank you is absolutely amazing.
You've reminded me of something, actually, Antonio, talking of cells, or talking of fetuses, makes me think of small organisms. But one comment we got on the advert for this show, somebody asked if we were going to talk about cell Earth, and this came up a couple of nights ago when we were all chatting then about the Earth potentially being like a cell of some description, with the waters obviously above and the waters below. Who wants to run with that one?
Well, if I can just say something, and I want to say this now before or in case physicists later take this and give us this as an explanation, okay? there could be an explanation that they make up, which would be, we're on a globe, we're spinning, the centrifugal force that everybody has said is missing is actually holding the water away from the surface of the Earth, but gravity is stopping it from flying away. So the consistency of the water being both pulled and pushed makes it harder, and that's why we have water out there. This is something that they could say that fits within their theories of gravity and centripetal and centrifugal forces.
It makes me think about sort of school education. So obviously we all talk at length about being taught about the globe, but the water cycle is something we also get force-fed at school, and how it works with obviously evaporation and so on and so forth. But that's something that could definitely do with another look at, wouldn't you all agree?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I got an email from CD last week, and he said, "Hey, Bob, think about this for a minute. What if this reality is more of a cellular type reality?" And he started going into plant cellular structure, and he gave me several examples of it. And I was looking at that thinking, wow, that could be very, very applicable. That we are in some sort of a structure that resembles that of a cell. So I definitely would not discount that idea by any means whatsoever. And also, water, it seems like it's definitely one of the most abundant things on the Earth. And its constituent elements are hydrogen and oxygen. And hydrogen, they say, is one of the most abundant elements in all the universe. So there's something to it. I mean, that seems like that's one of the very base elements of creation.
We all need water to survive, not just humans. I think every creature on Earth needs water to survive. I can't think of one that doesn't. And also, we start out as human beings in the uterus, inside the amniotic fluid sac. So we are in a semi-permeable barrier before we are born, which is really interesting considering there may be some kind of semi-permeable barrier above.
Right.
And the old as above, so below, or so below as above, excuse me if I've got that wrong. These things all seem very connected. We start out as a single cell as well, we human beings, everything. So it's all mind-blowing.
Yes. And the information, because we accommodate information, actual forming fingers, hands, cells, everything. At first, we're a very simple configuration of energy in that single cell. The energy that comes to us from the nutrients from the mother and the consciousness or the orders for structuring, which we think it comes from DNA, it's like fluid has information. We're in a fluid in the womb, and there's a transfer. So information in the fluid to information in the fluid, which we then carry on taking in fluid with this membrane on the outside of our body, this organ that keeps all the fluid in. Is
wow.
Like, yeah.
And air is a fluid as well, really, when you think about it.
Yeah,
yeah.
It has its water elements in it for sure, and that kind of brings us back around full circle to the idea of, at 100 kilometers, we've got some sort of a membrane up there that is kind of a gradual increase of viscosity until you finally get into the liquidness of outer space. And of course, cells have membranes, just like, same type of structure. So I mean, the more you kind of take this line of thought, the more it actually starts making sense that the Earth could be, the circle of the Earth could be in this sort of liquid type bubble that not only has liquid aspects to it, but clearly there are also electromagnetic aspects to it, which opens up a whole nother world of possibilities as well. It also, if space is truly liquid, then Mr. Thriven Survives' idea where he was trying to show, I guess let me back up a little bit. One of the things that flat earthers get criticism from ball earthers is they say, well, on the equinoxes, on a globe Earth, you will see the sun rise at 090 and set at 270, which is east and west, essentially straight east and straight west, no matter where you are. And of course, in the flat Earth model, that represents a huge problem. Unless, so one of Rich's Thrive and Survive's solutions to that was to basically have, the example he gave was to provide a glass, right? And he's moving the glass back and forth across the sun, and the sun looks like it's in all these different positions at the same time. Well, if it's truly water that's up there, the water can do the very same thing, the exact same effect that Rich was showing. And furthermore, there was a video that My Perspective did that was talking about if you have a floodlight or you have a sunlight source and it's shining down on the Earth, you're not going to get the type of lighting that we actually see where things are backlit. And so My Perspective was saying there has got to be another source of lighting. Well, enter the sun and the space model where we're essentially surrounded by this water, and anybody that has an aquarium knows that, you know, if you have a light inside of an aquarium, that light seems to propagate all throughout the aquarium, and it kind of gives you an even distribution of lighting because of the refraction in the light in the aquarium itself. So, wow, all of a sudden these things start falling into place because we're not looking at the sun as being in a vacuum, where it would not have these refractive properties other than by possible electromagnetic, you know, phenomenon like I've talked about with the Faraday effect. But it just seems like it's a lot more logical that it would be propagating through water, have the refractive properties of water, which would give us our sun at all different latitudes, looking like it's coming directly from 090 and setting at 270. It's just beautiful. It answers a lot of questions when you look at it in that perspective.
Especially if it's a dome shape, you could have these ridiculous sort of speed changes that the flat Earth model currently has for the sun, perfectly accounted for just by the shape of that cell.
But also,
Exactly.
even if the surface area where the firmament is, even if that was not concave, it would still seem concave to us by the relative effect of light. We could see this, that there's the famous footage, balloon footage from over the Caucasus Mountains, and the balloon is capturing the sun and the moon as it's spinning. The camera is capturing the two of them, and the surface below the balloon is white, and you have the sun over there surrounded by black, and on the other side the moon surrounded by black. So the sun is not in an area of the sky that's blue. The balloon is capturing, the camera on the balloon is capturing the sun, but that area of the sky is not blue. But on the surface of the Earth, where they're looking up at that sun, it is blue. And the reason it seems to me that the blue has not reached the point where the camera is interference from the atmospheric qualities of the fluid.
Mm-hmm. And one other thing I kind of wanted to throw in too, as I've been looking at several different models, I'm still looking at Free Energy's, kind of repetitive space model, but also there's another guy named Aaron Dover that has come out with his yin-yang theory. Okay, and I pretty much agree with that. Not only that, he shows that it very clearly works on the sunrises and sunsets. But up until a few days ago, I was looking at that yin-yang kind of light formation, that tapering fish that's kind of curling back as part of the centrifugal vortex that would be emanating off of the North Pole that would give that effect. But there's another thing that I think could do it too, is if they're actually going around up there and they are agitating this liquid, so to speak, they would kind of have this vortex.
Like a propeller.
Precisely. That by its very nature would alter the viscosity of the water, within the vortex pattern itself, which is going to have different refractive properties at different points along that vortex. So that's something else to me that makes a lot of sense. Whether or not it's done by the electromagnetic vortex in the centripetal and centrifugal magnetic lines, or whether it's done by kind of stirring up this water, this liquid, as they traverse around it, I don't know. But it seems like either one or maybe both would certainly give that type of appearance to what we're seeing. Because, in one of the demonstrations that Aaron Dover gave, he was showing a pilot that was flying at about 35,000 feet, and you could see this clear demarcation, of light and dark that was really bizarre. You wouldn't think you'd be able to see that. And that just kind of gave a little bit more evidence, in my mind, that we are not, and this goes back to, we need to think outside of the box, because most people are trying to solve this mystery by using the model that NASA has given us. NASA has told us that space is a vacuum. NASA has told us that, all these things, and basically we know NASA's full of BS because they're purposely trying to mislead us to not only coming up with wrong models, but in thinking about how things really would work so that we can come up with a viable model. So, like I say, you got to think outside the box, and it's amazing how many things are right there in front of our face, and we can even be talking about it and not really realize what it is that we're talking about. That's why Crow 777, I watched that, my jaw just dropped.
Me too.
Because it wasn't anything that we hadn't talked about before, but I looked at it in a totally different way, and I'm like, whoa.
Maybe we do all live in a...
Sorry, Patricia, to bring this to Patricia, if that makes sense.
Oh.
But Patricia was actually sending a message to Mark when Bob and I think Antonio and Patricia, pretty much the same people here now, were chatting, and the message that you were sending was almost identical. Can you tell us a bit about that? Because I'm hoping we can link it back to Synchronicity.
I would love to have read it to you, but what happened was I found the Crow 777 video, and I was so thrilled and excited and was having all those thoughts that we've all been talking about and that Bob definitely expressed, and I immediately messaged Mark first, linked him the video, and I sent the video to all of you and some other people and said, watch this video. Anyway, and you may have already watched it, but I sent to Mark, and he immediately said a few things back to me. He said he was driving somewhere, but he'd watch it, and he started watching it. And I was talking to him about everything we were saying here, talking about space and snorkels in space and the embryos and baptism and prayer and I can't even think of all the things we just discussed, cells and membranes, all of it. And then immediately we all kind of were gathering on a hangout, and everybody was talking about the same exact things, which means not just us, everybody in the Flat Earth community who'd seen the video was probably having the same experience. Synchronicity? Maybe,
yes.
Maybe because of water. That's how we're getting this information.
Yes, and I'm sure there'll be people out there who take ownership of their ideas and think that they're the only genius who has figured all this out, and then when somebody else voices that idea, that person is either channeling them or has somehow stolen their idea. Maybe they've written something on their computer and they assume that they've been hacked. It's like, no, we're all getting the same ideas at the same time because we're sharing the same consciousness.
And water has memory, and maybe that's really what this is all about.
Well,
the
if
whole
you think
thing of us being one could be even more true than we ever really thought. Maybe we all live in a yellow submarine after all.
Yeah, but even if you think if you think of the lily example, which is the same as the incantation, the sending of the intent into the water. So with the lily, there's a physical lily that goes into a jar of water. With the incantation, what goes into the water is a mystery, but this incantation, the gratitude, for instance, goes into the water. It can also go into the water out there, up there. And when we, being water, receive information from that water, it's going to be similar. If there are images in that water, for instance, lilies, we will see lilies. So I can see a lily and think, oh, I've just had a vision of a lily and it's mine. And Nathan and Patricia and you, Bob, you all get ideas. You also see a lily, and you think, no, it's mine. I was first. It's like, no, we're all sharing the same lily. It's the same lily.
It's like when somebody...
examples of flat earthers who have actually literally said, and I'm going to name and shame, he's going to have to hate me for it, I'm afraid, but Matt Powerland specifically said that Eric Dubay was almost squatting in his in his loft and listening to his ideas, the notion being that the ideas Matt Powerland had were exclusively his, and someone had come along and stolen those ideas. Whereas what we're kind of lending this conversation to is the idea that the collective unconscious will give equal chance to anybody to have a stab at that idea and grab it out of the air, however that may be. And just because two people come up with the same idea doesn't necessarily mean that one has stolen it from the other. And Validation Boy, who's coming in for a bit of a kicking occasionally because he's a good example of this, specifically said that he felt that Orphan Grey, or Sasha Orphan Red, was channeling his ideas. Now, nothing could be further from the truth. Obviously, Sasha is not being channeled or channeling Validation Boy. They're just subject to the same ideas coming from this, as we call it, the collective unconscious.
Yeah, what I think happens, this is just a vague theory. I think what happens, cognitively speaking, is you have a nebulous idea that has certain areas defined, but vaguely defined. And by conceptualizing, by looking at it, you mold it. Like Sasha said, you know, things can happen here and they have a direct relationship with something somewhere else. So you have the idea of the lily, but it's just colors, vague colors. You look at it and you start to see and create the outlines for the lily. It was a lily originally, but it took the human mind to basically delineate the boundaries. Now, this delineated boundary goes out to the collective unconscious, but when it's received by somebody else, again, it's also vague. And they look at it and they delineate the same lily. So they think that they have delineated this lily. They have conjured up the whole lily. And it's like, no, it's the same thing. So when somebody like Validation Boy says that Sasha is channeling him, he will not have had all the thoughts that Sasha was putting out crisply delineated. He will have had vague gestures of it. Sasha has delineated it, and he's now seeing it delineated in his mind, and he's assuming that she's just, you know, eavesdropping telepathically or whatever.
It's the difference between people and their perspective on life. If I have an idea and I think it's interesting, and then Antonio, for example, you message me with something close to that idea, I'm going to think, wow, we're on the same wavelength, or this must be something many people are thinking about, and I'll feel happy and we'll be more connected. But then other people, when they see someone else with an idea they've been working on, will feel negative, angry, very upset, and become paranoid and think other people have stolen their ideas. So it's really part also not just of the collective unconscious, it's how we ourselves value our own selves and how our own self-esteem is.
Right, and that all goes back to you know, resonance, and I've talked about the idea of resonance where you have maximum power transfer in an electronic circuit. But resonance in this particular case is where you have several people that are focused with intention of trying to understand the model, the Earth that we're living on. We're all kind of on the same frequency there, if you will. And when we are in that position, we are accessing an area of consciousness that is commensurate with the intention that we're all putting out. And so you, Patricia, are thinking about that. I'm thinking about it. Jeff Stewart's thinking about it. Validation Boy's thinking about it. And all of a sudden, you know, we have all these other people, and then we start seeing people actually come out and verbalize it, or in my case, you know, as I've said many times before, I will have an idea, and then the next day, you know, a lot of times the very next day, somebody will come out with a video on it, or I'll find it where they had just done the video maybe 2 or 3 days before, and I'm just thinking, wow, this is such, I call it synchronicity, but that synchronicity comes about by many people of like vibration accessing the same part of the Akashic record, if you will, or the morphogenic field, if you want to look at it that way, with the same intention, which brings about the same vibration. And when you have that, you have resonance, and you have the same type of transfer back to you, and therefore we're all thinking the same thing. So
yes.
Antonio and I simplified this the other day by talking about a phone call that you might receive from your mother at the exact time that you pick up the phone. Or this actually happened with me, Gav, and Gav, the room mod who's not actually here today. He's moving house. So yeah, hope that goes well, Gav. But yeah, he started typing on Skype the minute I started typing, and Antonio and I sort of extrapolated this back to, well, we've both got plans for the same show, he's going to be moderating it, it makes sense. And then if you extrapolate that one step further, you've got the phone call from a mother that you haven't spoken to in a week, and you pick up the receiver, and before you even dial the number, you've actually connected because they've called you, and that again makes sense that you're on the same lines, you're going to come to the same conclusions. But you can extrapolate that out for almost anything, and you can extrapolate it out indefinitely. In other words, synchronicity versus coincidence or coincidence.
When someone says to you, I'm looking at a new car, and they tell you the brand of the car, and you've never heard of it, you don't know what it looks like, and that's in your head, you go about your day, and you see that car in front of you, and then you're in a parking lot, and wait, you're parked next to that car, and you wonder, have you always known this car existed? Did you just plug into it because your friend told you about the car? It could be absolutely nothing, but it could be something.
Yes, or you have it like happened to me. You're looking for a motorbike. We call them scooters in the UK. I don't know if you call them that in the US, like Vespa type motorbikes.
I've got a Vespa, so yes, we call them scooters.
So I'm on eBay, and I'm looking for scooters in my price range, and I'm saving them, to my watch it list. And as soon as I've finished, I get a call. No, actually, I've just finished. I get a message on Facebook from a friend of mine who lives 5 minutes away, who says to me, "Hey, do you want to buy a motorbike? I've just bought a scooter, and my girlfriend says it doesn't suit me, but she said it would suit somebody like you." Now, I had just finished saving scooters. I hadn't actually found something I really liked. I go to his house, and the one that he has, I really like. It has the horn-style handlebars. It's a really cool scooter. How did that happen? He was riding this scooter. He wasn't on the internet. He wasn't hacking me. He's not computer savvy. What happened there? This isn't a case like with Nathan explaining that, if your mother calls every Sunday at 9 o'clock and you haven't spoken to her, and it's maybe 9:05, and you think, oh, I'll call my mother. You reach for the phone and she has called you. You can see how there's a structure to that idea, and how, yes, psychologists could say it is just coincidence. But when it's something completely out of the blue, I had not discussed with him wanting to buy a scooter. The thought had just popped into my head that day. And I thought, the summer's coming, I might, So I go online, and this happens. Now, this friend of mine, he's not a scooter rider. He rides big, powerful performance bikes. What happened there? This isn't just, a mesh of ideas. There's something else going on. Magical thinking. That's what it is.
Did you buy the scooter? That's the real question here.
I did.
Yay.
Well, he'd gone to Wales to pick it up and had ridden back. It had taken him 4 hours to ride it back, and So and then his girlfriend said it doesn't suit you. So,
but it suits you, Antonio. Maybe she likes you.
Well, he's a muscular guy, and at the time I had long hair, and he looks like the kind of scooter that a stoner dude might, or maybe a surfer dude might ride, but not a tattooed muscle man,
Got it. Makes
He's
sense.
a tattooed muscle man. So, that's just weird. How did that happen? What happened there? What connections went on?
Yeah, it's kind of like going back to back in the old days when we had normal landlines. Well, I guess we still do today, but a lot of people have cell phones. But how many times, back then, had you just thought about calling somebody, and you pick up the phone and it hasn't even rang, and they're already on the phone, thinking,
Yes.
"Oh my God, I was just thinking about you."
Like, what, who, why are you on the phone? Why are you on the phone? You just called me. Wait, I just called? It's like this confusion moment, and then you realize it.
And not to bring it down into this, but there's also, as we started the conversation on this note, the negative sort of connotations that come from the collective unconscious. Whether or not you want to believe it's coincidence or not, there's a certain amount of people who will receive this information by however means, and then assume that it's theirs. And when someone else comes out with it, it's a certain there's an amount of self-importance involved. Maybe you can address this, Patricia. I know you're probably the most social of all of us on this panel, I would have said.
Well, I do see these sorts of things happen. Sometimes I feel like I am a den mother for certain aspects of the flat earth because I have a somewhat neutral position. I guess I've given it to myself of being an interviewer. And so I try not to take sides. But I do see this exact same thing happening with people believing things that aren't true about situations, about other people, and then acting on it by, creating issues within Hangouts, making videos, and on and on and on. So I watch it from this perspective of being somewhat neutral on the issue, and I sometimes get caught in the crossfire personally when it comes to that. And I'm sure anyone watching's maybe seen a video or two where that sort of thing is happening. One just came out, another one just came out today on me. So people getting caught, people getting confused, getting the wrong information, maybe from the collective unconscious, running with it, not actually conferring with the person who could solve all of their problems, and instead going right with a video. So.
And what I found is the same people who claim ownership of an idea are also the kind of people who resent not being paid attention to. They don't think, oh, I've only had a couple of hundred views. Next video I make, I'll change something, I'll add some humor or better visuals. And no, they deserve more attention and they haven't received it, and therefore there's something wrong. It's almost as if they're trying to they're using arrogance as a facade for their insecurity, and they're saying people are stealing my ideas, because those ideas being mine is part of what I use for my integrity. It's not. Your integrity is pretty shoddy. You should build it up from ground level, really. But they do a lot of projection. So people are channeling them, or people are stealing their data, whatever it is. And it always seems to be the same people who clamor for more attention. It's like they're thinking, other people are stealing my ideas, and because they are voicing those ideas, they are getting the attention, which is rightly mine. I had the idea first. There's no way somebody can actually time who had an idea first. There's no shared database where whenever somebody suddenly has an image of an apple pop into the mind, they quickly go on and write apple, and it gives you a timestamp, and somebody in China who thinks it 3 minutes later, there's a discrepancy, and you could say I win. It's not a competition.
Well, Antonio, a lot of that comes from this resonance thing. Again, it not only works for the positive energy, but it works for the negative energy. A good example that I can use that I noticed is a lot of times if you're driving and you find somebody that's going way too slow in front of you, or they sit there at a green light and they're not going, and you're just like going, and you're starting to get really angry. And what I've noticed that when that happens to me, or somebody will cut me off and it'll make me mad, and I'll get into this, kind of negative funk, well, I will notice almost immediately that I will draw that type of other driver energy towards myself. And other people will come up and they'll try and cut you off, and then they'll have this attitude and they'll try and pick a fight with you, or several other things. So I think
Sorry, Bobby, you gave a really cracking example of a friend of yours that this.
Yes, tell that story again. It's a good one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll do that. This is a story about my friend Chuck, and this was about 20 years ago, before I met Cammie. I lived in an apartment complex, and there was a guy named Chuck who used to hang out with us, and we'd all go shooting guns together and stuff like that. But Chuck lived in his van, okay? And he would come over to the house, and I'd let him use my shower and stuff like that. And I'm like, Chuck, how come you're always like kind of hanging in the parking lot? He goes, well, because I hate driving everywhere. And I'm like, why? And he goes, because every time I drive anywhere, I get cut off by people constantly. And I mean, he would talk about this endlessly over and over and over again. Now, I will also say that Chuck is kind of a self-defeatist type of person also. He has kind of a negative attitude about his life and things in general. Thus, he's living in his van, right? Well, anyway, so he went on and on about this to a point where, I got kind of tired of hearing it. And it's like, okay, Chuck, I think this is BS. Let's go take a ride. I want to see this happen. So we get in his van, and
Sorry, Bob. I'm noticing that your mic, the mute button keeps flashing as you're speaking. I don't know if there's something.
I noticed it too, but he hasn't dropped out once.
Oh.
No, but I'm wondering if it's interfering on the YouTube feed. Here, it's coming out clear, but there was a little flashing.
No, it'll be fine on the YouTube feed if we can hear each other.
Cool.
Okay. So anyway, getting back to Chuck, so we got in his van, and we started driving out of the parking lot. And before we even got out of the parking lot, somebody came around from behind another building and cut him off. And I just went, wow, that's okay. So we get out on the street, and we go driving, and we get down the street a couple blocks, and all of a sudden somebody comes from a side street and cuts him off again. And then we continue driving, and somebody is in the lane next to us, and then they cut him off again. So needless to say, this happens like 4 times in this little 20-minute ride. And I'm just dumbfounded. I'm like going, that's absolutely amazing. So when we got back to the apartment complex, back to my apartment, I looked at him, I said, Chuck, do you have any idea how powerful you actually are? And he goes, what are you talking about? And I go, do you realize that it's you that's causing this to happen? You are so dead set in this belief that, and also kind of a negative energy type belief, that, but you're so focused on it that you're absolutely manifesting it every time you drive. And beyond that, like I said, he lived in his van. He always had this kind of, crappy outlook on life, like, the whole world was out to get him. And conversely, as a result of that, he never really had much. He never really had much success. Never had any girlfriends, anything like that. And he was a really nice guy, so it always puzzled me. But it occurred to me that was the deal behind Chuck, is he was absolutely so focused on it and so resonant with that thought that he manifested it in every day of his life. Absolutely amazing.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Sorry, Patricia. To bring this onto a more positive vibrational level, if you like, so you've got Chuck with his negative energy, and it could be the case that by trying to demonstrate it to you, you're having an influence as well on that energy. And this only occurred to me today. So David Weiss, Antonio, and I were chatting yesterday, and this morning David Weiss dropped me a message saying, I just have to speak to somebody. I need to express this idea, and I can't type it. I need to talk to somebody. And he had ideas about the moon. Now, again, it wouldn't surprise me at all if in the next day or two there's a moon video which David Weiss will say, that was my idea, that was what I was trying to voice. I just couldn't get it out. I didn't have you there to talk to about it.
Yes, but this is what I think is really cool, that the majority of people that are kind of kind and conscious, when somebody else puts it out, they go, oh, brilliant, I was thinking this. They don't think, hey, you stole my idea, you preempted me, I was going to make a video. It's just like, oh, cool, now maybe it's me and I'm just lazy, but I think, oh, cool, now I don't have to make a video about it. But you know what I've noticed? Going back to driving, I've mentioned this before, I'm a very mellow driver. I haven't always been. I've had performance cars, but, life is nicer when you drive slow. So when there are people waiting to come into the traffic, I always let them in, because I think that person's now going to have a sense of happiness. I let them in. They could have waited for 10 minutes if nobody let them in. So, and then they knock this on further down the road. They let somebody else in. And it's like, yeah, they're thinking, that guy that let me in, I have a good feeling about that guy. I want somebody else, this is all unconscious, to have a good feeling about me and my car,
It's got a name. It's
and
called
it has
motoring.
Yeah, well, it has this knock-on effect. But what I've also found is sometimes I'll be driving, and I'm not a complete pacifist, I'm not a Buddhist monk. And people piss me off sometimes, not driving, just in general in life. So I'll start thinking, this traffic is driving slow, and I start thinking about somebody who's been really nasty, and I start getting agitated. Not actually, getting energetic, but I'm sitting and I'm thinking, yeah, that. And I start thinking of things that I would do if there was no, comeback. And yeah, I would do this. And I notice that my windscreen starts getting foggy. So the actual thought that's agitating me must be causing a temperature rise that causes the inside of my windscreen to create condensation. So now I use my windscreen to make sure that I'm not thinking negatively. It's just, you know, if you want to learn things about the world and your interactions with it, the world shows you. You know, you just have to kind of pay attention.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to use biofeedback there, Anthony. Or Anthony.
Yeah.
The other day,
Antonio,
I went through Starbucks to get a coffee in Houston, Texas. We have drive-through coffee places, and that's the closest place. And I wanted coffee really quick, although I can make it home. Sometimes I'm lazy. Those who talk with me on a personal level joke about my Starbucks addiction. Addiction. Anyway, so I went to get this soy latte, and when I went, I noticed that for some reason they were very slow in making my order. I have no idea why, and a bunch of cars piled up behind me. And I paid for the person behind me their drink. And I would hope, you know, it's nothing. It's just like a couple of extra bucks. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be great if that continued on and a bunch of people continued, you know, with the chain? And, you know, it's pay it forward, but in my case it was pay it backwards to all the cars behind me. And those people won't understand what happened, but it'll dawn on them, and then they'll pay for the person behind them, and they'll walk away with a good feeling or drive away with a good feeling. And maybe when they get to their office or they get back to their husband or wife or children, they'll be nicer. Just like if you get agitated in the car, Antonio, and your windows start steaming up, you, if you didn't check yourself and realize what you were doing, could be maybe a little angry to a person who's driving toward you, or a little bit slow or a little bit fast, and or to somebody that you meet on the street next. So it's kind of that sort of same thing. It's all part of the consciousness creating. It sounds very New Agey, and I'm not New Age at all, but it is that doing nice things, being nice, creates niceness all around you, and who doesn't want that?
Right.
Yeah.
That's where karma comes from, the idea of karma. Because you know, when you're resonant at a certain energy, you may not necessarily draw back that same type of energy right away. However, like when Antonio, you know, talks about letting somebody in, and then there's this gratitude that comes from them, well, that energy is kind of put out towards you, and it's stored in this karmic database, if you will, that it will usually come back to you at some point, and even, you know, several fold over. And again, a lot of people say, oh yeah, this is all New Agey, but you could say that, but I think that if you actually practice this line of thinking and you start actually paying attention to it, with what your intentions are, with what your vibrations are, I think the demonstration will prove itself beyond any shadow of a doubt. And then it's hard not to become a believer. And then, of course, when you do become a believer, you have invested it, like Chuck did, in your own belief system that this is the way things work. And when you believe it even more, then it continues to manifest, and it changes your entire life that way.
There was a nice example that was on My Name is Earl, which obviously deals with karma, and it lends itself to something that Antonio is trying to get the idea out of, which is God not having a beard, God being some kind of vibration or part of many different vibrations. And in My Name is Earl, there was a bad character that had done many, many horrible things, but was actually quite nice to Earl, but then pissed him off, and Earl thumped him and knocked him out. And as a consequence of this, the guy went to jail and got his just deserves for all the wrong things he'd done. And Earl was kind of caught up feeling guilty for having done this. And his brother, who's not necessarily the sharpest tool in the box, pointed out that karma doesn't have fists. In other words, it's the vibration that's acted upon Earl and made him do something that had no relevance to his, as you put it, the database of karma that he put in, or his relation with the guy. He was just acting on karma's behalf. He was karma's fists on that occasion. But karma itself doesn't have any. It's like God, it doesn't have a beard.
But going back to your point, Bob, the attention, you know, so if you think that you can magic the most convenient parking space, and you get the most convenient parking. Yes,
people call it parking karma.
Yeah,
I hear people say, "I've got good parking karma," and they just get a space right in front.
Yeah, so same here. And when I've done it with people who are incredibly skeptical, they just scratch it down to coincidence. You know, they say, "There's no way you could have known." It's like, yes, I didn't know. I was expecting. You know, that's what it starts with, hope and then expectation, and you pay attention to that. So what you were saying, Bob, it's like the attention itself is what causes the observer effect that is so famous now in the world of psychology and science. Humans observing something mold or interact with that thing that they're observing. So if what you're observing is how life responds to you, and your attention is on noticing all the benevolent ways that it responds to you, that's what you see. So it reinforces that you're paying attention correctly, so you do it more, it reflects back more, and everybody has bad things. I just recently had an abscess. You know, I didn't think it's because I didn't pay it much mind. It's gone, and you know, thanks to antibiotics and colloidal silver. But there are people I know somebody, and all she ever really talks about are problems. There'll be maybe a few minutes of light banter about, you know, just inconsequential things, but then she'll veer the question or the situation to discussing her problems. And this is what she does all the time. And I explained to her once that her problems aren't monsters waiting around the corner that will jump on her. I said, if it's a problem, it has a solution. If it doesn't have a solution, it's a circumstance, not a problem. So learn to deal with it, but don't walk around with your shoulders hunched thinking that a problem is going to jump on you. That's not life. But some people just can't get it. You know, pay attention to what you like. Pay attention to children. You know, when children playing happily, you know, just notice the happiness instead of looking for the strange guy sat in the park, you know, in the big overcoats and having all that dark thoughts. No, you know, dictate your own thoughts yourself. That's
maybe where a lot of strange, over-the-top paranoia within the Flat Earth community and any truth community might come from, is people aren't paying attention to the good things, the happy things, like you said, Antonio, the children playing. They're looking for the guy in the dark trench coat in the corner doing some Masonic activities with his hat pulled low over his eyes, you know. When they're by thinking it, they're creating that guy who wasn't even there in the first place. And then they're acting as if that guy exists, and then it's creating a whole domino effect of negativity.
And you can sit there. The truth is, I've been to a park where there's been a dodgy guy. Yeah, this has happened. So I've been in the park, and you know, with my nieces and a bunch of kids, and my sister, and there's a dodgy guy just sat there, okay, and say, oh, is that guy dodgy because of all the negative things that could be associated with him, or could that guy be dodgy, sat there on his own, looking all shady, because his grandchildren were killed in a car accident, and he goes to the park to remember them? We have no way of knowing. We're not going to go up. We're not going to ask a policeman to profile him. You know, we have no way of knowing what's going on. But if you sit there thinking that the world is dark, then the world is dark. If you sit there thinking the world is not so dark, then it's the same thing. The world is not so dark. The Dalai Lama said it. Life is hard for those who believe it's hard. There.
Isn't there the character Eeyore that's in Winnie the Pooh, who is the donkey? I believe he's a donkey who's always complaining, and negative things are always happening to him. And I've known many people like that. Now, we all do complain about things. It's the normal thing when you're with friends. You'll talk about this bad thing that happened, and then you'll talk about good things. But we've all known some Eeyores in our life. And I used to work for a radio station in California, and the engineer, the guy who was responsible for maintaining the sound quality and the towers and everything like that, and the equipment of any sort, was always complaining that nobody paid him any attention, nobody appreciated him, and he was better than this other guy who got a promotion over him. This would go on for years, to the point where most people at first tried to help him and reassure him and buck him up, and most people started ignoring him. And sadly enough, found out that a year ago he died of a brain tumor. Could it be self-created? Could it be unrelated? We don't know, but why take the risk of being that Eeyore type character?
Well, that's a nice link, actually, Patricia, we've talked about self-importance, and one of the things that I like to highlight is that Flat Earth has not brought self-importance, but self-worth, or the realization of one's own abilities. And this is something that probably ties into the collective unconscious, in the respect that some people might view it that suddenly I have this grandiose, this great information. It's all me, as opposed to realization that the social aspects will magnify this, and that the realization has come through one's own ability to realize one's ability. So for the guy who thinks no one's watching him, he doesn't actually realize, like I've forgotten his name already, the guy having people cut him off, how powerful he really is.
It's Chuck.
Yes.
He lives in a van down by the river, for those who know that joke.
Yeah, so Chuck is very, very powerful, and in the same way, so is the guy who died of a brain tumour, and he's brought on a lot of negative energy. And for me, Flat Earth meant that I could suddenly start looking out the window instead of at the television screen, and that's something very, very empowering when you realise that you have the ability to question things quite fundamental, or fundamentally question things.
Right, and to kind of take it beyond that, I'm sorry, Antonio, to kind of take it beyond that, I'll give you one other example, and I told you guys about this the other night in our hangout, and I don't think Cammie will mind me saying it, but when you understand that this is the way that things work, and that you really have much more control over your life than you ever thought that you would, I'm going to give you an example of how we've manifested that in our life between Cammie and I. Before we had Jaren is now 12 years old, so when Cammie and I got married, she had basically been told by several doctors and diagnosed as being clinically infertile. And she was very depressed about that because she, very much wanted to have kids. And the doctor said, nope, can't do it, you are infertile, never going to happen. And, when I met her, I told her I could see how much she really wanted to have a child. So when I met her, I said, look, the first thing you have to do is ignore your doctors, ignore these people, and stop putting so much faith into what they're telling you, and take control of your reality yourself. It doesn't matter that they've diagnosed you with a medical impossibility of becoming pregnant. It doesn't matter. You can overcome that. And so I kind of shared with her how to visualize and bring things into manifestation, and how you can focus on it. And so I taught her that. We both focused on it, and within probably a few months of doing that, she was able to get pregnant, and we have Jaren, who is a very healthy, happy, almost teenager to this day. And that's just a great example. And I do that. I have several examples I could use over my life, but I just think this is a really good one because, she was told by doctors, by experts, that, oh, you'll never be able to have any children. And I just simply said, out of my pure optimism, that's BS. Here's how you do it. Let's do it. And bada bing, we have our baby. It's great.
And in the medical world, they have a diagnostic trick, which is when somebody's diagnosed with a stage 4 cancer, so it's been caught right at the end. It's that's it. It's the end. And the next thing to happen is chemo and radiotherapy, but death. So you have chemo and radiotherapy, or death without the chemo and radiotherapy. And the person goes off and starts healing themselves, goes back, and what the doctors do is they simply write the diagnostic trick called spontaneous remission. That's it. They can't explain it. They said it was going to kill him. It was absolutely 100% scientifically proven, statistically, it was going to kill him without any doubt. It hasn't done it. It's gone away. Don't know what happened. Let's not lose credit for having said that it was going to kill him, and just say that spontaneous remission happened, and that it happens sometimes.
Yeah, and they use the word remission, kind of meaning that it could come back. They don't say the patient spontaneously cured themselves with positive thoughts and love.
Yes.
Which is really what happened. That's what doctors do. They do come to you and tell you that you have a diagnosis of cancer, and you have a year to live. Well, guess how long you'll live? Probably a year, unless you take matters into your own hands and realize that they're programming your mind by saying that. So
right.
I looked after a. I'm not going to say his name because confidentiality, but I looked after a really nice guy around my age who had been stabbed in the eye after doing somebody a favor. Anyway, I won't give too many details. Stabbed, his brain was with a long screwdriver, and his brain was basically severed. Okay, he was conscious in a coma, but conscious, so maybe not a coma. He was in a completely vegetative state, and the specialists were continuously telling him and relatives that this is how he would remain, as this continuously vegetative state. They knew that he was conscious, but he had no way of communicating with the world, and he didn't believe them, and neither did one of his relatives. So they looked for different specialists. Of 12 specialists, one explained that the brain is plastic and can sometimes create associations in areas that aren't supposed to be able to achieve the function they achieve. But there are cases when people who have had similar injuries have recovered. So guess which of the 12 doctors?
Sorry, Antonio. This is something that I want to actually boil down, because when somebody asks quite a big question, which is, what does the flat Earth matter? What we're talking about now is, with flat Earth at least, a big key to people opening up this ability within themselves. So Bob a second ago said it's a realization of one's own reality, what is actually happening around them, and you can actually manifest your own reality. Well, that's a pretty big deal. Now, it has no direct relation to any flat Earth proof, but that is one of the key things, that when you figure out you've been lied to, you open up a lot of different neural pathways, or the plasticity of your brain, however you want to phrase it. That is suddenly opened up, the floodgates to that part of your mind are open when you stop just being told where you live, how it works.
Yep, yes. Absolutely true, Nathan. I want to go back and address one thing that Antonio was talking about. And the doctors have found there are, well, let me actually take it back to plants. When you look at plants under Kirlian photography and you can see their energy that's there, you can also take and like cut part of a leaf off on a plant, and a very interesting thing happens when you do that. And what that is the energy signature from the part of the plant that you just cut off actually remains there. It's kind of like a phantom effect, they call it. And this, again, is a big clue to a lot of things that are holographically in our nature. And when you were talking about the guy where, you know, part of his brain had basically been taken out, and the doctors are saying that, you know, while new neural pathways can be brought about, they've actually had people that have been gunshot victims where it has taken out a large part of their brain, or they've had some sort of lobotomy, and they will recover to virtually 100% functionality. And again, they attribute this to the holographic nature of the brain. And you know, like I said, an analog is what you can see under Kirlian photography. So taking that and then going back to something else that we were talking about, you know, when I was talking about how your intention will allow you to manifest things. The intention comes out of a belief system. And a good example of a belief system and how it can manifest things like, you know, what you're believing or what you're focusing on is something simply called the placebo effect. Okay, we've all heard about the placebo effect. It's basically where doctors will do a controlled study and they will give some patients medicine that is supposed to cure something, and they'll give other people sugar pills, and they will see, you know, the basic acceptance of it. But another big factor of placebo effect is the belief behind it. In other words, the doctor could give you sugar pills, and they've done this many times before, and they will say, well, you've got this little ailment, here, take this pill, absolutely is going to make you all better. And depending on the amount of trust and belief that the patient has in their doctor is directly commensurate to whether or not they're going to get well or better, or how fast they get well or better. So your belief system is huge behind this. So it's all about where you're putting that mental energy that is kind of the reality. And this will go back, and we'll take this back in a minute, to how it applies to the Earth, especially as a cellular structure and vibration and the general awakening of flat Earth. But I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, it's your friend Chuck. If if the first time that something lucky had happened to him, he'd said, "Oh man, I'm a lucky guy. Lucky things happen to me," then that would have been his life. Instead, the first time somebody cut him up, he thought, "Oh man, I don't like being cut up," and boom, sent that wave out, and there you go. That's what the world brought him. So
it's the old thoughts are things.
yes, well they
People
are.
always say that, and they are.
Yes.
Believe it or
magical
not.
thinking. I mean, I don't know if Antonio wants to move on to magic at this point, but certainly magical thinking was something we discussed the other night.
Well, when we don't understand something, we call it divine or magical, or we have a range of words that we use to explain that there isn't any scientific knowledge. Or one thing I wanted to bring up is that there's quite a lot of talk about scientism. It's like, yeah, physics is this thing based on faith, but biology, chemistry, there are other realms in science that are completely bona fide. So I think when we talk about scientism, it's mainly the theory based. So we have biology, everything's bona fide. The theory part of it is the evolution bit. You know, with physics, we have things that are verified, and the theory part of it is the theoretical physics. So it's the theory part of the sciences that I think we should just laugh at. I genuinely think that we should listen to what they say and just laugh. You know, just otherwise it can cause you to feel a little bit dark. You know, so just laugh it off. Say, yeah, sure, we're spinning through space, and yeah. So
before we leave this subject, though, sorry, Antonio, it's a really cracking point, and you're absolutely right. But Bob mentioned about the placebo effect, and I know GeoShift did a fairly recent video, which was about the reverse placebo effect. Did you see that, Bob?
Absolutely, I did, and I was actually going to comment on that, but you're right. The reverse placebo effect that he was talking about essentially is people will come down with cancer from smoking cigarettes, mostly because of the fact they're reading the side of that cigarette package that says, "Warning, the Surgeon General, a person of authority, has determined that smoking can cause cancer, yada, 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 and all these other problems," right? So when people buy into this, again, it manifests. Another very similar thing to that is when they have breast cancer awareness weeks, and they go hot and heavy in the media, and they advertise it. Well, statistically, isn't this strange, but statistically, during those particular times where they're running these campaigns, pink ribbon campaigns, you know, battle against breast cancer and whatnot, they will have a much higher incidence of diagnosed breast cancer. Amazing. So many things like that they will tell you that all this stuff is bad for you, and when you buy into it, you absolutely make it for real. Now, tobacco in and of itself does not cause cancer. One could argue that the tobacco itself is fine, but it's the additives and the chemicals and stuff like that that could facilitate the cancer. May or may not be true, but one thing we know about tobacco smoking and stuff like that is that the native Indians smoked tobaccos. Many cultures have smoked tobacco, never had any problems with cancer. In fact, mostly because they had never even heard of it before. This cancer is something that, you know, ever since the invention of the term or the diagnosis of the disease, and it became so highly publicized, all of a sudden it reaches epidemic proportions because we're being bombarded with that information. This will give you cancer, that'll give you cancer, asbestos gives you cancer, you work in this industry, it gives you cancer, yada, 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 yada. And it's like, it's no wonder this is the reverse placebo effect, and I agree with GeoShifter 100% on that.
It's like we're creating cancer by talking about how things give us cancer.
Yes, the Native Americans who lived their relationship with nature versus their relationship with identity. Their identity was intrinsically linked to nature, and ours isn't. Our identity is usually intrinsically linked to what we do, our function in society. I'm an artist, and you know, this person's an engineer, and that's what we link it to. Now, the way they interacted with the world would be one where if they saw a horse with a tumor, they would watch this horse. They would watch what this horse ate. And if there was ever a person with a tumor, they would go and get those same leaves that that horse was eating, that all the other horses were not eating, they would collect those leaves and make a tea out of it, and that's Essiac. This is the Edna Casey tea. Then, you know, it's just by looking at nature. So I'm thinking the Native Americans simply thought animals know what they need, and that's what they do, and then the world reflected that to them. It could have been the case that these plants didn't have the similar effect on a human body, but it turned out that maybe they molded it, so who knows? But the truth is that by taking observations of the world, like if we look at how we interact with people and how people respond to things and how we respond to things, we can make things much better in an individual basis. And like Bob said before, the karma has this knock-on effect. You know, you will give somebody else a good vibe. That person will give somebody else, like you were saying, Patricia. If what you did with the coffee, buying the drink for the guy behind, if that had this knock-on effect, it's not so difficult. I think it just takes more people to do the same. We see it
could be going on right now.
Yeah,
and you know about the horse with the tumor eating leaves. There could be a negative person with a negative view who sees the horse eating those leaves and says to himself, "Boy, those leaves that horse likes. That's why that horse has that tumor."
Yes.
So you got to be careful of how you look at things.
Yes.
Yep. Another thing that's really interesting about that also, guys, is one of G. Edward Griffin's famous talks, besides the Federal Reserve System, which is outstanding, he did another talk called A World Without Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And what he found, what he was basically saying is that there are certain cultures, like the Hunsikans, that essentially have never even had cancer in their culture whatsoever. And he goes on to document that basically one of the reasons that they don't have cancer is because they eat foods that are high in nitrillicides. Now, nitrillicides come from vitamin B17, which has several names. Laetrile is a purified form of it. Amygdalin is another type of vitamin B17, which is high in nitrillicides. Apple seeds, apricot seeds are high in nitrillicides. So he's saying basically that cultures that are doing this have a very low incidence of cancers. What he also said is that, like dogs, for example, or animals will eat certain grasses when they're not feeling well, which are high in this B17 or nitrillicides, Laetrile, amygdalin, whatever you want to call it, and that this is one of the things that not only cures them, but keeps them from, you know, coming down with cancers and stuff like that. So it's very interesting that you'd mentioned that. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
I'm wondering whether at some stage a puppy had it taught to them by the parent, or if it's in the dog collective unconscious. How do they know to eat these? You know, they
like
might
the
be
monkeys knowing how to open coconuts, and then on another island far away, the other monkeys learn how to do it.
Mm-hmm. Instinctive.
And before I'm hoping, Bob, you're going to come back at some point to Flat Earth Realization and Cell Earth. But before you do that, I'm hoping that Patricia, you can address a slightly different cancer. Did you receive my Facebook message from Michelle Glow? I think she's name is Shell Glow on. Oh,
Shell Glow, wonderful, sweet YouTuber. Yes, I received a message from her telling me to take heart about some instance of a person trying to do bad things to me behind the scenes. I'm not sure if that's your message that you were speaking
No.
of.
It was more specifically to do with something that Jesse Spots had highlighted. It may have been some time ago, but I wasn't aware of it. Antonio was asking about, we were discussing a John Le Bon subject of paid trolls, and
yes.
Antonio pointed out that Shell Glow had been counting down the number of messages she got from a certain troll. So I dropped her a message and asked her about it, and then forwarded that on to you. Did you get that?
I
a company
think
called,
I did.
I think it was Fiverr. I'll have a look at it now.
Yeah.
All right, I'll have to look.
Fiverr.com.
Oh, okay. I do remember now. You know how many messages I get per day? Well, probably just as many as you guys do. Well, probably. You know, who am I talking to here? Of course, you know how many. Like all of us in the Flat Earth. I'm going to look on my phone right now. I remember that somebody was, and Jesse came up with a good point that. Why don't you tell us? Because I'm going to have to look it up to remind myself of what happened, Nathan.
Maybe you can say, Antonio, as it was you that originally
Okay,
came up
well,
with this.
this is what it was. I was watching one of Shell Glow's videos, and I read the comments afterwards. I always watch the video first and then read the comments. So,
That's a direct dig at something else.
yes.
Initials
So-
M.E.
So I'm looking, and somebody is trolling her. They are mocking her age. They're mocking standard troll tactics. And she's got back to him a couple of times, and the guy's continuing, and somebody else jumps in, and the guy's continuing with that somebody else, and then she writes to him. You have, I think it was eight messages to go before you get your $5 from the website that I know is paying you. So I don't know whether she doxed him or what, but this is what she said. Now, his comments stopped, and it made me think, hold on a second, I've suspected that people were getting paid. In fact, there's inside the whole Hollywood Illuminati thing, somebody came out and made a video about how she was hired to work basically to troll people. So there are companies out there that do pay people to troll, just like there are companies out there that pay people to monitor, how many clicks you do on a certain website for advertising purposes. So I asked Nathan if he had any details, and he passed me this message from Jesse Spots, which was Jesse Spots basically saying it's Fiverr.
He writes
Five
Fiverr.com, and he writes, Flat Earth folks, here's a way to earn money. Go to Fiverr and accept money from I'll just use the word bad people, because that's not the word he used, bad people paying people to troll our forums. And so people who are pro-globe and anti-flat earth are accepting money from Fiverr.com to go and troll before they reach their $5, and
Yes.
making a living off of potentially trolling our forums. And these are probably the people who have no picture, the type. They show
Yes.
up all over Facebook, YouTube, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Interesting. So paid trolls,
and
we don't
could
have proof of this, but it's pretty close to being quite
But
possible.
If this is the case, many people out there who want to contribute more to the whole FE world, who don't want to make videos or can't make videos, they could join. In fact, all of us could join and just either, if they want to make sure that no flat earthers are pushing the flat earth, so we can just pretend to be fake globalists and do really misleading questions that cause people, like when somebody asks you a question about the constellations and your answer is a slam dunk. So we could do the same, just, behave like a globalist and say, wait a minute, how does this work? And then allow the flat earther, and get into a long exchange, make a fortune, and then we can all buy gold shoes.
Yes, exactly. And we all need gold shoes.
Yes.
Yeah,
This is an interesting point, actually, because this is something where Bob and I think, disagree, because initially I viewed it exactly like that. I thought I'll leave the troll comments because it's my opportunity to address their flat earth questions and on occasion learn something from the trolls. So if they have more global information than I do, in the case of satellites when I first started making videos, they definitely had more information than I did. Same with NASA. A lot of the way I learned how Apollo was just a complete and utter nonsense was from the trolls, about them telling me about how the radio transmission should have worked, about it being a relay off the LEM. All of that nonsense I got from the trolls.
Yeah, let me kind of clarify that a little bit, Nathan. I'm not saying that those are the people that we should be blocking or banning or anything like that. When I say troll, I mean the people that are calling us morons,
Yes.
complete idiots. Now, as far as the people that come in with sound arguments, like Int Cheese or International Cheese Eater, who has now been assigned to my Perspective site. He kind of got taken off of Globebusters ever since the debate.
Assigned to. Taken off.
Well, I'm sorry, but
Seems like
I
it.
honestly believe that guy. Well, whatever. I like him. Don't get me wrong. I like him. He has fantastic points. He always came up with things that really made me think. It's like, wow. So even when I'm watching a My Perspective video, I will specifically go out and I will seek out International Cheese Eater's comments because I know that he is there to present a very good argument against it and to have valid points. and I take those to heart. So those kind of trolls, I think, absolutely are not only, it should not be banned, but they're very, very helpful to us, especially if they're actually, looking at some of the clear science about it. But when I say people that are just in there, saying vulgar, nasty, horrible things, those are the people that are calling you a moron or anybody else. Those are the people that need to go, and those are the people I have zero tolerance for and will be banned.
Yeah.
So would Red Rhetoric be banned from Globus chat?
Yes, he would be, because he is a foul-mouthed little punk.
Yeah, he's gone too far. He's just gone too far.
There are people out there, Nathan, who genuinely think that they can rescue flat earthers. We've been deluded and we've been sucked into this world, and they really try to help us out. And their arguments are usually pretty sound, apart from when you veer it into an area where their arguments are no longer sound, like the Milky Way from Hawaii, and why is it not different 6 months later? At what point? Just things that they can't respond to. Then they start becoming abusive and saying, "Look, I'm trying to help you, you stupid retard." And it's like, okay, are they actually trying to help you, or are they just trying to mislead people who are looking? Are they trying to help us? Are they trying to convince us that we're mistaken, or are they only using our pages as a forum to try to convince people who might be wavering?
Well, that
brings
us full circle. Sorry, Patricia, to the vibration level. Again, this is back to David Weiss and his chat that he did, and he was on a comedy show for all those people who are leaving nasty comments about Flat Earth. But he was on a show, and they just rattled off question after question after question before David Weiss had any opportunity to even give an answer. And afterwards, we discussed it and said, well, there is a possibility that some people simply aren't on the vibrational level to accept this information. And when they're asking frequent, constant, non-stop questions without any pause, it may be the case that they're just looking for a point that you have no answer, so they can breathe a sigh of relief and get back to their current vibrational standard.
Yes, and continue to feel smart, where for a moment there they were feeling dumb. And we flat earthers were, where we found the new information, we, for some reason, all, even if we didn't know each other, we were all okay with feeling dumb for a minute and saying,
well, that was
wow.
Matt Powerland's point. I think Matt Powerland said that people will look at it as though you can't possibly know this, you can't get this, because that would make you smarter than me, and that can't possibly be the case. And people don't like that. It angers them.
This is the ego situation. I've faced this so much with my colleagues. It keeps coming down to ego, and I'm saying, guys, just these observations of the real world. You've got the same kind of brain and instrumentation. I'm not smart for saying that this moon that we're seeing right now is impossible. I'm just putting two and two together, and you're not putting two and two together. You're refusing to. It's not that 2 and 2 does not equal 4. It's that they're just not willing to contemplate it, and it's because they have their ego, and me saying something that they haven't thought of is almost like a challenge to them. They imagine that I think I'm superior for having made this observation, and that's not the case. Even when and then they say that I'm condescending because I explained to them that the flat Earth removes the whole illusion of superiority and hierarchy and authority. It dissolves it all. So when I
flat Earth gives you the opportunity to have realization.
Yeah, but this is when I explain to them that every human being who has a mind can make observations that are valid. They don't have to be in a specialist field. In fact, being in a specialist field will make it much more difficult for them to make the observations they would have made without all those filters put in there. But when I explain this, the conversation has gone from 2 and 2 equaling 4 to me condescending to them. It's like, well, no, I'm explaining something to you that you don't understand. And it's like, well, you're saying that you understand something that we can't understand. It's like, well, yes, sometimes that's the case. If I've had a really hot curry and you haven't, I can tell you how hot it was. You can't tell me unless you actually try it, So
talking of things that we don't necessarily understand, maybe this is a point that Bob can round out the show by giving us his flat Earth realization and Cell Earth.
Yes, Cell Earth.
Okay.
Well, Cell Earth though is connected to concave Earth. That's what we know his name is calling concave Earth now.
Yeah, well, that's a different kind of Cell Earth. that he's talking about. When I am drawing this analogy, I'm talking about a literal biological cell. Okay, in that the Earth itself, I believe, is a living organism. It's an entity all in and of itself, and so, like a cell, and if we are indeed surrounded by this firmament that instead of it being necessarily a hard glass, maybe at some point it's a hard construct or glass, but I think that the demonstrations of the balloon and other ideas could give us at least the impression that there is a soft area of that cell, just like a cell, a biological cell. There's a soft membrane part to the cell. Okay, and cells have receptors. Okay, and these receptors basically take in information via enzymes and certain chemical mixtures, which cause the cell to literally morph its internal construct. In other words, it becomes very responsive to the input signals that are coming into it. So if we kind of apply that analogy on a macro level to the Earth itself, when you have the inhabitants of the planet that are becoming vibrationally higher and higher in frequency, and you have this kind of awakening going on. And this is something, by the way, that the Mayans prophesized, as well as many other cultures. They talk about an awakening. In Revelation, it's referred to as the revelation of divine knowledge, and also, where all the bad guys are essentially outed. When all of these hidden things come to the surface, it gives people a much broader base of information to draw on, and then they will start making connections like cells amongst themselves, and collectively we then start, by our expansion of consciousness, collectively our vibration actually starts rising. And I've talked about how this is actually done and can be measured by Kirlian photography amongst many other methodologies. But the point is that if and when we get to this critical tipping point where we are all vibrating on a higher level, it kind of carries over like a 100th monkey effect to the rest of the collective consciousness, and it kind of starts to go viral. And that is what's meant by the collective term of awakening and expanding our consciousness. Because when we start getting a broader view of the reality that surrounds us and understanding how much control we have within it, then we can start collectively making society and this world that we live in a much, much better place. And this is what, I kind of also talked about this as the solution to getting out of our current conundrum. I know there were other YouTubers out there who were saying that, no, you can't solve these problems by having a kumbaya fest, and we know what we're talking about there. And I wasn't saying that at all, but what I am saying is that when we treat each other with more kindness, more understanding, we are more self-reflective, then each of us individually contributes to the larger whole of humanity. And there will be a tipping point, the straw that broke the camel's back, however you want to look at it. And when this happens, then more and more people are going to, wake up and realize, wow, we're the creators. We're the ones that really have the most influence on this earth, not these crazy, Illuminati people, the 1% that know all the tricks and have hidden everything from us. They do this for a very good reason, because they want to do everything they can possibly do to squash the rise of vibration and the expansion of consciousness and awareness. And this is what's going to solve the problems of the world. You can never solve the problems that are created from a lower vibration until you get to a higher vibration. Then the solutions become apparent. So
yes,
that's
and
when
people say you can't fix everything with a kumbaya attitude, actually that's almost entirely wrong.
Exactly.
The research that was done by the Peace Institute, the University for Peace Studies, where they had a group of people meditating in Washington State, and for a period of 3 days whilst they meditated, crime rates fell and admissions to hospital fell. They weren't chanting Kumbaya, but they had this effect. Now, if they had been chanting Kumbaya, then the person who said you can't fix this by chanting Kumbaya would be proven false. So I propose that if anybody's listening that's at all associated with them, that when they're doing this meditation, that they have a tape playing Kumbaya, just, you know, to put it out there. Because the impact that a collective putting a thought out, an idea out, like thank you, like gratitude, like problems being resolved, when you put those ideas out there, the way the world responds, the world responds. This is the thing. The world does respond. It never has a deaf ear. It never doesn't have an interaction back.
I wouldn't be doing a good service unless I did this, and I'm really sorry, Bob, because I completely and totally agree with you, but I know there's going to be people out there who will express this thought, which is, it kind of goes to when you said awakening. I know we discussed this the other night. There will be a certain percentage of people that say, and this goes to you as well, Patricia, that the awakening, as we phrase it, could only be a psychological operation. And Patricia is often labelled as part of that psychological operation.
Mm-hmm. I'm here to wake people up, but only so far, because that's the master plan. When, meanwhile, I talk to anybody with many, many different topics. So, of course, that really can't be true if you look at who I've interviewed, from big channels to somebody who's only got one video. But I do only interview pleasant people, though. It's true. Just like when I bought the drink for the person behind me in the Starbucks, it's the kumbaya mentality. And if that person bought the person behind them's drink and that continued, you can bet every single one of those persons were happy. They were happy. Yep.
In fact, there's a religion based on that, and it's the Krishna consciousness. What are they called? The Hare Krishna with Gauranga. They have this expression, Gauranga. And it literally means let happiness spread. Just let happiness spread. They'll put big posters of it. They will just any opportunity that they'll put it out, and it's part of their faith that by doing this there is more peace and happiness. So this not completely, because it's linked to the Hare Krishna. It doesn't mean that it's completely lunatic. Hare Krishnas can live all their life as Hare Krishnas. So maybe they've got something there. Because they don't work, they just dance and sing all day long, and go and collect alms. But there's something to it. You put out this message of peace and happiness, like when people spray on walls, no more war. Well, no, spray happiness or peace, or it's in the phraseology. So when somebody objected to Kumbaya, even though nobody had actually sang Kumbaya. They're positing an idea, and it comes from the same kind of mind that calls other people shills, or they started calling us something else, the top brass.
Yes.
All of these ideas. Yeah, all of these ideas come from.
By calling us the top brass, we become the top brass, although we really aren't. It's this weird. Some people are afraid that certain people will rise up in Flat Earth and control the movement when they're not. I don't have that many subscribers compared to many other flat earthers, but to put me in a category of top brass, it's crazy. So by saying that, you're creating it, and by saying, "Oh, Patricia will never interview me on her show. My show's way better than hers, but she'll never interview me," and putting out negative stuff, there's a real guarantee I'll never interview you, because you're only putting out negativity, and I don't really see any value. You could turn it around. Not that being on my show is all that important. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this can be a part of anybody's life, no matter what they're doing. By putting out that negative nature, you're going to cut down on the happiness you yourself will receive and what you yourself can give to your friends and your family.
This is, if you don't mind me jumping in, this is what I thought was the best thing about Synthetic Dread. That he thought, okay, what can I do? This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to mock trolls, and I'm going to, just use this negativity that's out there in the troll world, which some of it is also in the Flat Earth world with Validation Boy, just calling everybody out and stuff like that. So it's just such a clever, I thought it was a very clever thing to do, because it brings ridicule to things like Validation Boy or Robert Bassano or various other people out there who claim that people are ignoring them because and not letting their light shine, and doing this by refusing to interview them, when really, like Patricia, you just said, if they give you a bad vibe, they're not nice people, they're making horrible comments, why would you want to interview them?
Yeah. So, Nathan, to answer your question, or I should say your question on behalf of the critics, I will say that this whole awakening thing is a psyop. It is a psychological operation. What do I mean by that? I don't mean it's a psyop by any elite agenda. It's a psychological operation that is a natural part of cyclical evolution brought about by the Creator itself. Okay? That is who psyop this is. This goes way beyond the elites.
That really fits. Actually, if you don't mind me piggybacking on that, I think that's part of the reason for the chemtrails, to interfere with the mechanisms by which the psyop interacts with we humans, if the psyop is an intention of the Creator.
And the Creator is really the only top brass, not some minor players here in YouTube land like us or anyone else.
Yep. Yeah, we'll add to that it is, as I keep banging this drum, but it's about self-realization. It's about realizing our own abilities and realizing the power that we have within ourselves. And some people will see people like Patricia taking control of that power and utilizing it, and see it as something evil, and that kind of bugs me. Maybe this is a question for everybody. How do we make people realize that, be it a psyop that's a glorious one, or what was the other word you used, an awakening, rather than a psyop that's somehow come from the CIA?
Exactly.
How it makes you feel in your heart. That's how I know.
Yes.
That's how I know.
And also, what would their intent be to undermine their own authority? It doesn't add up. But like we've mentioned several times, there are people out there who keep putting out the idea that it's a psyop, that people are against them, that they're not being valued, and that's exactly what the world is reflecting back on them. Maybe they should stop putting that out all the time, and they'll stop seeing it reflected. Mm-hmm. But with the power,
stop being Chuck in the van by the river.
Yes, everybody out there, exactly. Stop being Chuck. Everybody out there, like Martin Licky's in the chat. Martin is brilliant because he thought, you know what? What I can do is simply this, and he did this, and now he's got a load of followers, not following him because he's a leader. Lots of people who are interested in what he has to say. And there are many people out there in the chat and who watch this later who will think, I can contribute too. I'm contributing by making comments back to trolls, or I'm contributing by saying that was a great video, I really enjoyed that. They can contribute by making their own videos. They can contribute in whatever way they see fit. But it's this engaging with the phenomenon. We are arriving at a new consciousness where we're seeing interactions between individual humans as consciousness, remote, not linked to each other by telephone, having ideas that are coming from the same place. And this is helping us all conceptualize what those mechanisms are. We're all getting a little piece of this and a little piece of that that's describing the structure of what existence is. That's what this is all about, really, is finding the nature of existence, what created and how does it work. And, if we want to ask what for, that's an individual question. But that's basically what we're doing. We're looking at how things have been led astray and how things really are and how things can get back to or maybe onto an original good track, the track where there's no more cataclysms that wipe off humanity, where they have to go back to the caves.
Yep, very well
so
said.
Just those simple things that we're after. Is there any last final points before we wrap the show up, guys? Anything any of you wanted to cover that we haven't already? I know there's probably a million things. Chemtrails came up for one.
There's a bunch of YouTubers who've been around a while, but many don't know them yet, that are really fun, really positive, really interesting. I think they're called the Twindians. They're twin Native American women. They have a good channel. It's really positive. They're cooking food and dancing outside barefoot in the cold with their dogs around and talking about flat Earth. And there's Jazz Sinclair. There's Lori Gale. Can anybody name a few others? What I'm saying is that I really don't contact these people and they don't contact me, but when I watch their videos, they're doing flat Earth their way, spreading love, spreading happiness, kumbaya, if you will, but also giving real information and how they feel, how it makes them feel, and then other people see that and connect with it, and it builds on itself. They get more followers, and they're not doing really anything. They're not showing a PowerPoint presentation and may not be doing experiments. Maybe they will. It's like Mr. Flat Taxi Rainbow Chemtrails, just to see him walking around with this boombox in the street singing, and it just makes you think, yeah, this is what this is all about. And it's a great thrilling feeling. And so those YouTubers are people I contact, and not because I'm the top brass making decisions about who will be popular and who will be not. It has nothing to do with that. I just look with a discerning eye like we all have, and Nathan, you do the same, and you think, they would make an interesting person to talk to, and I have them on my show, and then what happens after that, who knows? They could get 1,000 followers, or they could get unsubscribed by all of their followers. Who really knows? It's up to them and what they do with what they have and who they are, but they're putting out something that's saying, like the bottle of water with the word love written on it. That's what they're putting out, and when you turn their video on, that is what you feel.
Yep.
Yes.
My neighbor Melissa Fade to Black is another person like that.
Yes. I was trying to think.
I watched her first video today. Yes, brilliant.
Yeah,
I like her story about when she was needing just some help.
And she found the woman came up to her and asked her if she needed God or something. I just watched that today. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it sent chills down my back.
Yes.
Yeah, nothing fancy or anything like that, but it's from the heart. And you know, like for example, she speaks from the heart, and she has kind of a dry, funky sense of humor, a little like Jaron, actually. They remind me of each other in a lot of ways. And so it's that kind of stuff that I'm attracted to, because I like people that are speaking from the heart. You can tell that they're not, making up a bunch of BS for ratings or views or anything like that. They're just real, genuine people. And those are the kind of people that I'm drawn towards. So I understand totally what you're saying, Patricia.
Were you comparing it to Jaronism or your son?
Jaron of Jaronism.
Yes.
In his funky sense of humor, or either. Yeah, my son's very funny also.
And this goes back to what I was saying about people out there contributing with comments but not with content. If you're happy with comments, brilliant. If you think you'd like to see what it's like to maybe show your face, or maybe just show a video but your voice, then do that. You will get trolls, but you will get, thanks to people like Patricia and Nathan and others out there, me, will share your videos. You'll get a lot of support too. And eventually the trolls, we should have spoken about this, the trolls leap on newbies. If we want to use that term, they just, there'd be one positive comment out of 12, 12 different channels will be saying you're a retard, you're a moron, blah, 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 blah. And eventually, if you don't give up after 3 months, 4 months, they just drop away. I get a troll comment maybe once a month. Before, it was 20 a day. So it does, pass away. And you can, like Bob said, you can just literally remove the comments, just delete them, don't respond to them. They will try to rattle you, to unbalance you, to make you agitated. That's their intent. Their intent is to make you unhappy and having any association with the flat earth with unhappiness. They
want you to quit.
That's the reason they're doing that. If you don't, you will just receive a lot of support, especially if you're a nice person. If you're a horrible piece of work, then, maybe don't make videos, I don't know. But if you're horrible, you're not going to get, if you're horrible, you're not going to get a lot of people who are positive endorsing what you're saying. You're going to get a lot of people who are really bitter about the world endorsing
And
they
they'll
don't
be dragging you down into a circle, most likely
Right.
as well. Hmm.
And people like that aren't necessarily paid shills.
Mm-mm.
They simply either have ego issues, or they feel this need to battle, and try and prove their intellectual superiority, or something like that. But the problem is they come across in a very condescending and negative way, and those are the kind of people that I'm calling trolls, and that I will delete their comments, and if it gets bad enough, I'll ban them from the channel altogether. But that's just, I don't see anything constructive in that at all. When people do that, if somebody has something to say, and it's constructive, or even goes against what you're trying to say, there's no reason why we can't be civil towards each other and engage in a civilized dialogue, and be nice to each other. In the meantime, you can have a heated debate and still be nice to each other, and anything other than that, to me, it lowers my vibration, and I want nothing to do with it. So
yes, in fact, we see this with politicians of opposing parties. They're in a debate, they're calling each other names, in a vague way, and later on you see them in some cocktail party, happy with each other, and world leaders, Saddam Hussein with Rumsfeld, and we see that in the upper realms of the elite, they don't have the same kind of animosity towards each other. They play a game. Now, this isn't a game. We're not playing games, and we're not going to make friends with somebody that we criticize. If our criticisms are valid, we want to come to an agreement where there's no more assaults, verbal assaults back and forth. It's needless.
I'm going to say, but just before we round out the show, and I hope nobody sees this as massively sycophantic, but to you personally, Bob, you've been a massive influence, and the way you're diplomatic with your approach and informative, you've been working hard to create information that is genuine and nice and kind-hearted, and that's really important. The same goes for Patricia. So there's, on the panel tonight, there's been, I hate to say it in a kumbaya way, but such a lot of love on the panel, and I want to kind of put that out. I know Jaren got a mention as well, and Jaren is a very important person, as much as people will hate me saying it because we get labelled top brass, but it's true. People like yourself that are going to the effort to put out this stuff need praise, because we get so much criticism and accused of being CIA shills and agents and all this kind of nonsense. So I want to put it out there, a personal thanks to both of you. Obviously, Antonio, I'm sure you feel the same and will echo this, but a massive thanks. You're working really hard, and it is genuinely appreciated. What you're doing is good and is appreciated. I'm sure everyone who's been in the chat room tonight will agree with me. So yeah, I'll round out the show with saying that. So thank you very much, Bob Xanadu from Globebusters, for being with us tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Well, thank you very much, Nathan. It was a pleasure being here, and thank you very much for acknowledging that, and I love it. It makes me feel good. It's good energy. So thank you very much.
It's sincere, it's heartfelt, and I mean it. Genuinely, it's important what you do, and I hope more people will send you appreciation. Yes. I know people say great show and stuff in the comments, but it'd be nice if someone took the time out to say, actually, you've really made a difference to how I think and feel. Same goes for you, Patricia. I know you probably get more flack than anybody else, and
I don't know why, but but I do want to say
thank you, Patricia. For being
very
on
much.
To the fourth wall this evening. It's been a real pleasure having you.
I do want to say about Bob, when I interviewed you, Bob, on my show, there was a couple comments in there that I wish Bob were my uncle. People just felt that way about Bob, that they felt like, I wish I had a cool man like that in my life, and they just picked the word uncle because that just seemed to suit. So, yeah. I'm Uncle Bob.
What I would like to say, that which echoes, I'm agreeing obviously with what Nathan just said, and it's not because I'm a kiss up, but I'm really thankful that Jaren from Jeranism and Bob and Patricia and all the other people out there who have received flack have the fortitude to not let that flack get to them. Like with Jeranism has had lots of videos made about him and how much of a retard he is, and his response to them is always patient. Even when he's agitated, it's always patient, and you can always tell that what he's trying to do is pass on good information and a sense of goodness. He's trying to evoke a sense of goodness. So when Red's rhetoric is being an idiot, Jaren is trying to get him to stop being an idiot. Not because then he won't make videos about Jaren, but because then Red's rhetoric will have a nicer life. You know, it's really a case of there's a benevolence out there, and everybody who's bickering and arguing, sending horrible comments and making horrible messages, they don't have this benevolence. I mean, none of us.
Jaren would say, be good to each other.
Yes, yes, exactly. That's what it is. And Patricia, I know that you've had a lot of grief from a lot of different avenues, and you know, so I'm thankful that you have the fortitude, and same with you, Bob. You have the fortitude to not let it get you down. So, praise to you.
Thank you both.
Once again,
Thank you
Bob
very much.
from Globebusters, Xanadude60, and Patricia Steer from Flat Earth and Other Hot Potatoes. And as always, Antonio Subrat. Thank you very much for joining me. I've been Nathan Oakley. I will see you all in the next video.